Hi, welcome to the Fintech Report podcast, a deep dive into the people, platforms and businesses in the fintech sector. I'm your host, Glen, and each episode I'll be talking with a leading expert in the fintech field. We're discussing a broad range of topics and issues, so thank you for taking the time to listen to this conversation. The Fintech Report podcast is brought to you in partnership with Australian Fintech, a news and information website covering everything you need to know in fintech in Australia and around the world as a directory of over 800 fintechs. Our thanks to the Australian Fintech team for supporting the Fintech Report. You can learn more at australianfintech.com.au. This podcast is also brought to you in partnership with global data aggregator and open banking experts, InvestNet Yodlee. InvestNet Yodlee has held an office in Australia for over a decade, is actively engaged with the ACCC and open banking, and is compliant with the highest level of local and international InfoSec standards. InvestNet Yodlee's data solutions are used by some of the region's most exciting and innovative companies, including 86400, Xero, and Finder. To today's topic, according to a recent article in The Economist, cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are worth over $2 trillion. To put that in perspective, the global gold market is estimated to be worth $10 trillion. The value of transactions that one of the most popular crypto platforms, Ethereum, reached $2.5 trillion in Q2 this year. That's around the same sum as Visa card processes. And there is a new explosive trend that is adding even more to the value of the market. This is non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. An NFT is a digital asset that represents a real-world object, like a piece of art or music. They are bought and sold online and stored on blockchain platforms. NFTs are like physical collector's items, only digital. So instead of owning an actual oil painting to hang on the wall, the buyer gets a digital file instead. NFTs are gaining traction because they are a great way to buy and sell digital artwork. For example, in March this year, auction house Christie's sold a JPEG from a digital artist called Beeple for $69 million, third largest sum paid for a piece of art produced by a living artist. In June this year, another auction house, Sotheby's, sold a crypto punk for $11.7 million. This is a pixelated image of a punk that was given away free as part of an experiment on the Ethereum blockchain in 2017. This is an image you can locate on Google Images, right-click on your mouse, and save that image to your computer. The largest NFT marketplace, OpenSea, has an explosion of sales. It's now worth over $3.4 billion in monthly turnover in August 2021. To help us understand these crazy trends in cryptocurrency markets, and in particular the opportunities for entrepreneurs and founders in the fintech space, I'm delighted to welcome Tim Lea to the podcast. After a 20-year career in banking and corporate finance, Tim has been in the blockchain space since 2015. He's the author of Down the Rabbit Hole, a book about blockchain and cryptocurrencies in plain English. And he's about to launch his own business, Walking Between Worlds, a project to enable indigenous communities to capitalise on the NFT revolution. Welcome, Tim. Thanks for being our guest on the Fintech Report podcast.
Oh, thanks, Glenn. Thanks for inviting me. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. So, look, what's your background and what led you to NFTs?
It's an interesting route. I mean, having spent so long working with the likes of GE Capital, HSBC, Lloyds Bank, and those sorts of guys, you get the entrepreneurial bent. And in 1995, I first got involved in the whole dot-com boom and bust and connected via the internet on February the 12th, 1995 at 2:16 p.m. in the afternoon. It was just that cathartic for me. And we actually connected to an art gallery about 10 kilometers away. At that time, connecting via a 14 4K modem, saw the image of a piece of art coming up. And it could have been Sydney, it could have been Seoul, could have been anywhere, and set up an internet cafe, bar and restaurant, which we had as a web design house. And we sold that in 2001 prior to coming down to Australia. And then in 2011, I looked at Bitcoin for the first time. And I'll be honest, I thought it was way too geeky. I thought it's going to go nowhere. And I confess I was completely wrong. I didn't invest. But then in 2015, I went down the rabbit hole in terms of Bitcoin and the actual technology underpinning it, which is the blockchain. And since that time, I've never come back. I saw what I saw with the internet back in 1995, but it was on steroids. I could just see where this was going to go. And it's come to the point where we're actually at the stage where we're going from the internet of information to the internet of value. And that's through the underlying technology that's linked into cryptocurrencies, which is the blockchain. And, from there, it's very much the layers of technology have really come into the mainstream audience for the first time really since 2015 through NFTs, where you can actually own and confirm your ownership of a digital asset, for example, a digital piece of art or a profile picture, whatever it might be. And it's so transformatory. This is the Pokemon Go moment for blockchain. If you remember back in 2017, 2018, whenever it was, where Pokemon Go introduced everybody to augmented reality. And what we're seeing with NFTs and the explosion in NFTs is the same moment, but for the blockchain space. And this is just going to be transformatory in so many different ways. And I'm just so delighted to be positioned in this space, having spent a lot of time working with the space, trying to find the right business models, working in, corporate linking into the space. But now where NFTs are, this is what I'm calling home right now.
Right. Thank you for that. So NFTs are a digital asset that they are stored on blockchain platforms like Ethereum. We can buy and sell these things. Is that a key attraction that, ordinary folks can trade pieces of digital art like they would do, but it's much easier to do it because there are marketplaces to do that?
I think the best way of looking at it to begin with is if you look at the Mona Lisa in the Louvre in Paris, it's a great painting, of course, and when you actually go up there and you see it, it's sort of quite iconic. It's actually quite disappointing when you see it, if I'm brutally honest. But the idea is you can actually right-click a copy of that image and store it on your computer or your desktop or your laptop or your phone, whatever it might be. But you don't own it. The blockchain layer that underpins non-fungible tokens enables ownership to be clearly defined and uniquely defined for a digital asset, for any form of digital file. And so by actually being able to identify ownership, you can identify the provenance of a particular piece of art, which is a big problem in the art space, for example. So, if you can actually see the ownership and you can identify ownership, you can identify the transfer of ownership. And that is so powerful. And what it means is you can identify, you can actually identify also the amount of money that's being paid, who's actually paid what. But one of the things that's really important, and I think this is one of the nubs of the power of NFTs, you can build into the NFT a recurring royalty structure. So what that means is, for example, with NBA Top Shots, the Basketball Association out of America, in February this year launched a thing called Top Shots, which is video pieces of a three-pointer that LeBron James or someone like that would have actually have shot. And you can actually own that video. So the idea is you go onto YouTube, you can see the same video of LeBron James with a three-pointer, but via the NFT structure, it actually means you actually own that video. And that video, for example, in February this year sold for $208,000, a 12-second video. But what it means is every time that video is sold or ownership is passed to somebody else, the NBA gets a clip on the ticket. And they'll typically get between 2.5% and 5% of the value of any sale. And if you think of anything to do with art, any piece of art now actually attracts a royalty that's built into the technology. So it means that behind the scenes, you're programming the financial layer that underpins the digital asset. And that becomes incredibly powerful because now publishers can look at their archives and they can say, what were the iconic moments in a cultural point in time? So Time magazine has released various areas relating to important iconic moments. CNN are talking about it, and other media publishers, latching on to the power of this technology because it means you can create new layers and new business models.
It's fascinating to think that there are millions and millions of people around the world that are creating art, and they can now monetize that, track it, license it out, and have a ongoing revenue stream surrounding it. There's a few things that I want to unpack about what you've just said. You've mentioned a few examples of how some people are using NFTs, but could you just give us an idea about who you think are going to be the producers, the owners, and then also who are going to be the users? So, I mean, is it going to be people that are creating adverts and just want an 8-second clip of LeBron James dropping that ball in the hoop? Can you give us an idea of that? Who are going to be the end users of the art?
Well, I think there are so many different areas that are beginning to happen and new business models that are building. But one of the things that we're seeing a bit of a trend coming through, for example, is that brands are looking at creating NFTs. I'll give you an example. And this could be a loyalty type play. For example, Taco Bell in the US have created a limited edition collection of NFTs and pieces of animated art that actually include their product. So, for example, if you think of Newton's Cradle, remember as a kid, you might have had that where you have the ball bearings that are on strings. And there might be, I think it's about 6 ball bearings. And the idea is you lift one ball bearing back, you let it fly, it then sends another ball bearing flying. I don't know if you remember, if you've seen that as a kid, but they've done Taco Bells like that, for example. So they've put a whole lot of different flavors of their Taco Bells in the same idea. And it's almost like a Newton's Cradle for Taco Bell. And so you've got these layers of branding ideas that are coming out. For example, Coca-Cola within the virtual reality space, which will be another subject that we'll sort of continue into a little bit later, who've actually produced a collectible series for for virtual reality. And you've got within gaming, for example, there are layers that are being built within games right now where you can identify digital assets within the game itself. And it's actually going to transform gaming. The head of YouTube Gaming back in August came out with a tweet that basically said, we are going to see free games instead of the methodology whereby people are actually paying for games. And the business model will be the creation of digital assets that people pay for within the games themselves. And so we've got whole layers going on. And this market is we're right at the very, very beginning of where this could go and can go. And so to be in line with the trends, it's very much gaming is going to be exceptional. And indeed, there was one idea, forgive me if I get the exact details wrong on terms of the value, but I think it was Versace that put out some digital collectible in the metaverse, as it's called, with virtual reality. And they put out a digital collectible with the idea that if you actually bought the digital collectible, you could have the same suit designed by the designers at Versace. And this was sold for something like $6 million. It was insane. This is something that's just beginning to happen, where fashion is coming into NFTs, linking into digital assets as well as linking into offline assets. And there are people doing shoes in digital environments as well that you can actually buy offline. So there's the models are just going to be as extensive as your imagination can create.
Got it. Okay, that's fascinating. Let's say I'm new to this and I want to start buying an NFT. Can you give me an idea as to what I need to do? Do I need a digital wallet? Do I need some Bitcoin? What platform would you recommend that I dip my toe into the water?
I think if you're going to sort of experiment with NFTs, the first site that I would guide people towards would be an organization called OpenSea. And these guys have created the largest marketplace in the NFT space. It accounts for about 92 to 95% of the market at the moment. And in August, they sold about $3.4 billion worth of sales, compared to about 95 million the previous year for the same time. Go into OpenSea and just have a look and just get a feel for what's going on. And I would say, if you're going to look at buying an NFT, first of all, just get a feel of what's going on, the sense of what's going on. Because what one has to do, you have to look at cryptocurrencies to buy and hold NFTs. And the primary market is via, for example, OpenSea. But this is actually layered on top of a layer called Ethereum. And in order to actually own and trade the NFT, you have to have the ability to buy and sell, or to use rather, Ethereum as the cryptocurrency. Now, to get hold of Ethereum, you can go through regulated exchanges. Now, in Australia, for example, there are a number like Binance, which is the largest global cryptocurrency market, or companies like Independent Reserve or BTC Markets. They've been around for a number of years. And the idea is you actually have to own Ethereum, and you connect it to what is known as a MetaMask wallet. Now, I don't propose to go into the nuances of that because we could be here for about 45 minutes. But it's important that you actually, number one, understand that you need Ethereum. So you have to buy that. Then number two, you have to look towards setting up a MetaMask wallet. Now, it's not that hard to do, and there are many videos on YouTube that will help you do that. Once you have a MetaMask wallet, you basically then connect that MetaMask wallet, which holds your Ethereum, to the marketplaces that you want to actually buy and sell your NFTs. And once you've got that infrastructure in place, then that's the time that you actually you can buy, sell, and own your NFTs. Now, there are some complications around that. It's not as user-friendly as everybody would like to see, I'll be honest. But once you've mastered it, and it doesn't take long to master it, to be honest, but once you've mastered it, you've then got complete flexibility to go in and out and trade and buy and sell. And once you go down that rabbit hole, you'll start buying pieces of art, which you then suddenly own. And it becomes really empowering from a whole variety of different levels. So bottom line is, buy Ethereum from an exchange, a regulated exchange. Make sure it's a good quality exchange. Number two, put it into your MetaMask wallet, which is the de facto standard for holding Ethereum. And then number three, you connect it to the high quality sites like OpenSea. So it's the process. Once you're in it and you understand it and you've tried it a couple of times, you'll be addicted. It's a phenomenally deep rabbit hole. But once you just feel it, smell it, and touch it, you'll see the opportunities that would just hit you in between the eyes of, this is phenomenally powerful.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And I think obviously, the people listening to the podcast, there's a huge variety of people in what you might call traditional finance as well as fintech. And depending on which area of fintech you're in, this may present a number of opportunities for you. Broadly speaking, there is a phrase called decentralized finance, or DeFi. What's your understanding of what DeFi means? And what do you think are the opportunities for people in the fintech sector to tap into or engage in the DeFi activities?
Okay, well, decentralized finance, or DeFi as it's called, is an area that is exploding at the same time. And it uses the same technology that underpins NFTs. I'll use the example of Ethereum. That's probably the best way of saying it. Now, in principle, decentralized finance is basically a layer of finance that provides the ability to go from the Internet of Information to the Internet of Value. And the idea with decentralized finance is that nobody actually owns the network. It's owned by the community. And if we look at, say, Bitcoin, which started the whole cryptocurrency wave off, Bitcoin and Ethereum are very similar in the way that they undertake the provision of the technical layers that represent decentralized finance. And the idea is you have a whole network of computers that are connected together. And these computers, without getting too deeply into the weeds, what is known as mine Bitcoin, or they mine Ethereum. And the idea is, in order to actually mine an Ethereum or a Bitcoin, they have to solve a cryptographic puzzle, which all the internet, all the computers on the actual network compete together to actually solve those cryptographic puzzles. Once they're solved, they then own, or then an Ethereum or a Bitcoin is actually released. And so the idea is that nobody actually owns the network. It's actually the miners and the community that actually own it. So what that means is the actual banks themselves that are providing so much of the financial infrastructure are not involved. And this is both a strength and a weakness, because what it actually means that decentralized finance is actually creating all sorts of opportunities. And I have to say, for anybody exploring decentralized finance, it is high risk if you do not know what you're doing. But decentralized finance, for example, is actually creating new models for exchanges, for example. So instead of actually having a centralized exchange like sort of the ASX or NASDAQ or something like that, you actually have a decentralized structure around those markets where individuals or companies or whatever they might be around the globe are actually providing the financial facilities to power those. And what it means is the banks are just not involved. And there are models within decentralized finance where you can actually generate yields of 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 100, 400%. Depending on the risk versus the reward that you actually want to explore. And what it means is if you compare that to traditional finance players and traditional banks where you might be lucky to generate 0.25, 0.5, maybe 1% on cash holdings, there are lots of organizations, companies and individuals who are moving funds into the DeFi space because of the yields that are being obtained. Now, obviously, that has massive implications relating to banks. If they're seeing the source of their ability to lend out money being eaten away by decentralized finance, it's creating some potential risks to the financial sector. Because one of the key things is with decentralized finance, you don't actually have a help desk based in India that can help you if you actually have problems. You essentially become your own bank. And that's the weakness to DeFi. You have to actually understand what's going on and to understand the risks. But it is creating dramatic changes in the traditional banking sector. And a number of the regulators, you can see it in the past 3 to 4 months, there's been a lot of regulatory talk about how does DeFi get regulated. And you can sense and just get a feel that it's the traditional banking sector that is hurting and that's applying pressure. So it's a layer where nobody owns the infrastructure. It's owned by communities. And that means you have to actually understand it more. But those that do understand it, there is some very strong alpha that's actually out there for parties. But of course, you have to do your deep research and talk to a financial advisor if you're not sure about what's going on.
Yeah, thank you for that. And obviously, anything you say isn't financial advice, and this isn't a podcast about financial advice. So yes, please go see a financial advisor for any kind of investment or transaction you're making. But look, your comment there, Tim, about the opportunities that are available to people using decentralized finance or DeFi, that's a really nice, lead into what you're doing now with Walking Between Worlds, your project to enable indigenous communities to capitalize on NFTs and use their artwork in really new and imaginative ways. Could you tell us a bit about your project, please?
Yes. Well, Walking Between Worlds, we've been working on this now for about 10 months. And we've got a team of 10 working working on the project, all pro bono, because we all see the power of the particular, of what the technology can do. And I guess the problem that we're really solving is that Indigenous communities globally, not just here in Australia, but globally, suffer from a massive digital divide. And so when you look at where the digital nativity, if you like, of fintech and cryptocurrencies is a prerequisite, if you look at those segments of communities that have a deep digital divide, under normal circumstances, they would tend to be laggards in terms of adoption. So without any direct involvement, what it would mean is that by organic methodology, it would probably be 18 months, 2 years before Indigenous communities even really explored and capitalized on NFTs. So what we are trying to do is to energize Indigenous communities to actually capitalize on the NFT revolution. And it's very much, the first part of the project is we're launching a series of 3 collections of Indigenous art that will be based around NFTs. And the first batch will be 1,000. The first collection will be 1,000. The second collection will be 3,000. Third collection, 5,000. And it's the idea, these are unique pieces of Indigenous art that people can own, buy and sell, that type of thing. But the wider project is about how do we actually empower and energize from the bottom up. And so, we've broken that down into 4 core areas where we see the biggest issues that need to be seen. So number 1, we've got four core pillars, if you like. The first pillar is very much about a collaboration engine where, for example, digital artists around the globe who might be excellent at animation, they'd be great at digital art. There's a thing called algorithmic art that is actually being seen as well. And it's the idea of how do we actually bring those people together to actually create unique pieces whereby through collaboration, there can be deeply animated, even elements linking to virtual reality in this type of area, where skill sets can be shared and skills transferred. And the idea that there's a collaboration engine. The second area is that we're going to be launching a 2.5D gallery, which will enable people, will enable a global art buyers, for example, to see really high quality Indigenous art in the best possible environment from a digital perspective. So we're about to partner with a 3D virtual reality company so that we can within what is known as the metaverse, looking at things like too deep into the tech, but it's virtual reality that's going on under the surface that links into blockchain technology. For example, places like Decentraland, whereby you can create virtual studios and virtual galleries, and these can actually showcase art, and you can actually bring in, for example, elements relating to the storytelling through augmented reality, virtual reality, and this type of thing. So the third element is very much how do we actually educate from the ground up, because this is all about empowerment. And so we're partnering with some educational institutions globally, plus some universities locally, whereby we can help to educate those within the Indigenous communities to actually undertake a lot of the digital structures that they need to actually bring their traditional art to life, and very much making sure that the right protocols are followed to protect the cultural aspects of the art. And the final section is very much linking into global investors that actually want to embrace Indigenous art, to get behind artists, to support them, and this type of thing. And so by bringing those 4 together, we're creating a platform that's going to be powered by a community token that will drive behavior, the appropriate behavior that will support the mission that we're actually on. And I'm really delighted to say that we've appointed a chair to the whole project, who is an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman who was a global expert on indigenous well-being. And she talks globally about indigenous suicide, which is a major, major problem in the whole indigenous space. And she's spoken at conferences in Canada and Finland and all these types of areas. So collectively, we're actually bringing the opportunity for indigenous communities to the here and now with best-in-class tools that will bring and empower those communities so that they can capitalize on the NFT space right now, rather than having to wait for 18 months to 2 years. And we're working with 2 young digital indigenous artists who are so fired up because when we launch the actual collections, through the automation of smart contracts that underpin the very technology, we're automating the distribution of 30% of all revenues will go to indigenous charities that the artists nominate. 30% will go to the artist, 30% will go to the platform to actually help build the community, and then 5% for carbon offset and 5% for regulation. So we're leveraging DeFi, decentralized finance, which enables the programmability of money, together with the idea of being able to own and transfer ownership of assets, of digital assets, with the idea that royalties will automatically be built in. So we know it's an ambitious project, but we've got such great people on board, and including sort of indigenous stakeholders as well. So we're really excited by where it could go.
Okay, so just to sort of confirm where I think you're at. So currently, if an indigenous person is an artist and they produce a piece of art, they either have to sell direct to the consumer or go through an agent or a retail shop or something like that. With your platform, they can produce art. It can either be originally in digital, or they can somehow scan their artwork and make it digital. They can then go direct to your platform. They can either sell or on-sell or earn permanent royalties from others who want to use that digital artwork. Is that correct? Is that if you're an indigenous artist, is that the value that you're creating?
Yes, broadly speaking, yes. I mean, it's very much, if you look at the way in which the value chain is created as it stands at the moment, there are a lot of dealers from the States and globally that come over to Australia. They go to the indigenous communities and they might buy a piece for $200, locally. They'll then take it over to the US and they'll sell it for $25,000. Now, that's fine. That's a business model that exists. But if you actually enable individuals to create the digital version of the art pieces, and they've got access to a global community and access to investors that want to actually buy indigenous art, what it means is the role of some of the dealers that are perhaps more rapacious than others will actually be, certainly partly taken out, but certainly the role will definitely change. There will be disintermediation of some description. And it's very much that the traditional artists can scan their original pieces, or they can create directly from scratch. And certainly there are models that exist within the global market where the original version of the piece of art might actually be destroyed, but the digital versions are still kept. Now, we are exploring, for example, of the idea where the individual original pieces may be kept within the community and available to be viewed, but the actual digital versions are made available as an NFT. So it can work in a number of different ways, and because this market is changing at such a rapid pace, we have to, number one, on the one side, create the opportunities for the indigenous artists, but number two, we have to preserve the indigenous protocols to make sure that that the intellectual property, the mythology, the storytelling are correctly held. So, broadly, you've hit it on the head. But there are nuances, obviously, that we have to be very, very cautious and very careful about.
Sure. And I suppose the other part of the marketplace is the demand from investors. And some of those investors, folks from the crypto world who are looking for the next asset class, they're looking for the next investment, they're looking for the next hot thing to invest in. But I would imagine there are also a huge category of people that buyers, and perhaps those folks, as you say, they're more used to flying around the world to buy pieces of art rather than investing in the crypto. What's your feeling in terms of how you can make this a global marketplace for indigenous artists? I'm conscious that there are many, many communities around the world where historically those indigenous communities have not connected to global online communities.
100%. I mean, we're viewing this as with indigenous communities here in Australia, we're viewing this as our MVP, the minimum viable product. And it's the idea that once we've created the structure and the infrastructure to empower the indigenous communities here in Australia, it's very much about taking it via partnership structures and other strategic relationships to other indigenous communities. I mean, for example, in the US, Monday, we're in mid-October here, Monday, Indigenous Day in America. And, through us doing a lot of digital marketing via Twitter Spaces and a whole variety of other digital structures, I've connected with a photographer who's an English guy himself, who's actually been working with the Hopi Foundation that are Native Americans. And he's created a structure of photographs that are beautiful photographs of the local region. And he's implementing structures whereby there's royalties going through to the Hopi Foundation. And so it's very much, we are looking towards bringing indigenous communities together within the space of art. And I think the really fascinating part of that could be, imagine getting a collaborative piece between a Native American and an Aboriginal artist or a Torres Strait Islander artist as a collective piece together, that the underlying messages coming out from indigenous communities are unified. I mean, I'm in talking to a number of different people globally, the messages coming out from indigenous communities are something that we can all learn from, especially relating to the environment. It's unbelievable how in tune with the environment indigenous communities are. So it's the idea, I literally woke up one morning about 4 months ago and said, how do we get an Incan artist in Peru to link in with an indigenous artist here in Australia? But that could be anywhere. So it's very much, this is about setting out a playbook for other indigenous communities. And that's why it's taken us 10 months to get here, because we just want to make sure we do this right.
That's fascinating, Tim. And for anyone that's interested in getting in touch with you, whether they're on the investor side or whether they represent or are an indigenous artist or community, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, we've just launched the first iteration of the website, which is walkingbetweenworlds.net. If you want to connect with me personally, just go to LinkedIn, and that's Tim Lea, Lea. Or Twitter is by far the best connection, and that's Timothy Lee 2, that's LEA. And also we've got Walking Between Worlds as a Twitter sort of connection. But but be delighted to hear from anybody that feels that they engage with what we're trying to do. We are trying to make this work, and we are trying to make this be sustainable, because that's in two senses of the word, obviously financially sustainable and from a sustainability point of view. So be delighted to hear from anybody that might want to get involved in the project or help, or indigenous artists, whatever it might be. We see this as a long-term journey. So, and it's a bigger project than all of us individually, and we're so fired up to make this work that any assistance is gratefully received, and I'm really grateful to you, Glenn, for allowing us the opportunity just to sort of share what we're trying to do and our vision for where it can go.
You're welcome, Tim. And look, our best wishes to you and the team for walking between worlds. It's a fascinating project. And look, thank you very much for taking us on a deep dive down the rabbit hole through Ethereum, through NFTs, through DeFi, and, finishing up your own indigenous communities art project. So best wishes. And thank you very much for being our guest on the Fintech Report podcast.
Thanks, Glenn. I appreciate your time.